America's Role in World War II, From Neutrality to Victory. This documentary explores how the United States went from isolationism in the late 1930s to playing a decisive role in defeating the Axis powers and shaping the post-war world. We'll examine the political debate over neutrality and the efforts to support Britain and other allies before war was declared, the shock of the Pearl Harbor attack, and the campaigns in North Africa, Italy, France and the Pacific. Along the way we'll highlight the contributions of women, African Americans and countless workers on the home front who built the ships, planes and weapons used overseas. We'll end by examining the atomic bombings and the birth of the United Nations. By following this arc, from reluctant bystander to leader of the free world, we'll better understand the war's enduring impact on America and on global history. In the late 1930s, the United States tried to avoid another foreign war. Congress passed a series of neutrality acts that restricted arms sales and loans to belligerent nations, but by 1937 President Franklin Roosevelt pushed through a cash and carry provision that allowed Britain and France to purchase non-military goods if they paid cash and carried them away themselves. When World War II broke out in Europe, Roosevelt argued that the United States must become the arsenal of democracy. In 1940 he swapped 50 aging American destroyers for leases on British bases in the Atlantic. On March 11, 1941 Congress passed the Lend-Lease Act authorizing the President to lend or lease war materials to any country vital to U.S. defense. By the end of 1941 the United States had already sent billions in aid to Britain and the Soviet Union while still officially neutral, laying the groundwork for a broader Allied coalition. By 1941 U.S.-Japanese relations had deteriorated over Japan's expansion in Asia. In July President Roosevelt froze Japanese assets and cut off oil and scrap metal, preventing American resources from fueling aggression. Negotiations stalled. On December 7 Japanese carriers struck Pearl Harbor without warning, sinking battleships and killing thousands. President Roosevelt told Congress that December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked. He asked lawmakers to recognize that a state of war had existed since the attack. Congress obliged almost unanimously, and the United States entered World War II. In the fall of 1942 the United States and Britain launched their first major joint offensive. Rather than invade France immediately, President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill agreed to attack Vichy-controlled North Africa. Operation Torch landed 107,000 Allied troops under General Dwight Eisenhower on the beaches of Morocco and Algeria on November 8, 1942, beyond the range of most Axis aircraft. The goals were to seize North Africa, open a second front against Germany and relieve pressure on the Soviet Union. Among the air units supporting the campaign were the Tuskegee Airmen, African-American pilots trained at a segregated facility in Alabama. The 99th Fighter Squadron and 332nd Fighter Group flew missions from North Africa to Italy, proving their skill and helping to dismantle racist assumptions at home. Torch marked the first American amphibious operation of the war and gave U.S. forces their baptism by fire in the Mediterranean theater, setting the stage for campaigns in Sicily and Italy. July 1943 the Allies turned their attention to Italy. Operation Husky, launched on July 9–10, saw the U.S. 7th Army and the British 8th Army, under Eisenhower's overall command, land more than 150,000 troops with over 3,000 ships on the southern coasts of Sicily. The invasion overcame heavy seas and stiff resistance but quickly secured the island, causing Mussolini's regime to collapse and Italy to switch sides. Yet German forces rushed into Italy and turned the peninsula into a brutal battleground. Allied troops slogged through mud and mountains at Salerno, Anzio and Monte Cassino before entering Rome in June 1944. The Italian campaign was a bloody slog, costing tens of thousands of casualties on both sides, but it tied down German divisions that might otherwise have reinforced France and hardened U.S. soldiers for the battles still to come. By 1944 the Allies were ready to return to Western Europe. Operation Overlord, better known as D-Day, launched just after midnight on June 6, 1944. An armada of more than 7,000 vessels carried 160,000 soldiers across the English Channel. Airborne troops were dropped behind German lines, and infantry stormed 5 beachheads along Normandy's coast. American forces suffered heavy casualties at Omaha Beach but gained a foothold by nightfall. By the end of June, the Allies had landed over 850,000 troops, 570,000 tons of supplies and 150,000 vehicles across Normandy. The breakout from Normandy paved the way for the liberation of Paris in August and the collapse of German positions in France. D-Day was the turning point in the European theater. It demonstrated the logistical genius of Allied planners and the courage of soldiers from many nations who fought their way ashore under withering fire. The war in the Pacific required a different strategy. After the bloody victory at Guadalcanal, Allied planners decided to bypass heavily fortified Japanese strongholds and instead seize lightly defended islands to serve as stepping stones toward Japan. This island hopping, or leapfrog, strategy allowed U.S. forces to advance across the Pacific while isolating enemy garrisons, leaving them to wither on the vine without costly frontal assaults. American Marines and soldiers fought fierce battles at Tarawa, Saipan, the Philippines, Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Each island captured brought Allied airfields closer to the Japanese homeland, but casualties mounted on both sides. By early 1945, Allied forces were bombing Japanese cities and blockading the archipelago. The Pacific Campaign tested the endurance of U.S. service members and demonstrated the power of industrial mobilization, as carriers, amphibious ships and advanced aircraft multiplied across the vast ocean. With the Allies closing in from east and west, Germany collapsed in the spring of 1945. Adolf Hitler committed suicide on April 30. German Chief of Staff Alfred Jodl signed an unconditional surrender at General Eisenhower's headquarters in Reims on May 7. And a second document was signed the next day in Berlin to satisfy the Soviets. President Truman announced Victory in Europe Day, VE Day, on May 8. In the Pacific, President Truman demanded Japan's unconditional surrender after the successful test of an atomic bomb. When Tokyo refused, the U.S. dropped Little Boy on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, killing about 80,000 people, and Fat Man on Nagasaki 3 days later, killing an estimated 39,000. Facing devastation and Soviet entry into the war, Japan surrendered on August 15. World War II killed tens of millions and left continents in ruins, but it also ended the fascist regimes that had plunged the world into conflict. The Allied victory reshaped the world and the United States. With its homeland unscarred and its economy booming, the U.S. emerged as one of the foremost economic, political and military powers. It helped rebuild Europe and Japan through programs like the Marshall Plan and became a founding member of the United Nations, committed to collective security and international cooperation. On the home front, the war accelerated social change. Millions of women entered factories and military auxiliaries, earning higher wages than in traditional jobs. Wartime rationing of food, shoes, metal and rubber demonstrated how a society could mobilize resources for a common cause. African Americans and other minorities demanded the double victory over fascism abroad and racism at home, setting the stage for the civil rights movement. The GI Bill sent veterans to college and built a middle class. By the war's end, the United States had not only helped defeat tyranny but also ignited debates about equality, democracy and America's role in the world.